That's training from such a young age. And if you are raised in a family where, unfortunately, you heard your parents fight about money, which is not uncommon because if there's not enough money, that causes different dynamics in families, then usually your modeling at an unconscious level is, oh, money's bad. Money makes mom cry. Money is somehow connected to conflict, right? And so
Mhm.
you grow up with this very strong connection that you do not talk about money because bad things happen if you do.
You're listening to the Midlife with Courage podcast. This is where women in midlife come for inspiration, motivation, and sometimes a little education to help them flourish after 40. Let's get started. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Midlife with Courage. I am Kim Benoit, your host. Today, I have a wonderful guest with me. Her name is Mikelann Valterra. Welcome to the podcast, Mikelann.
Hello from Seattle. I'm so happy to be here.
Yes, we are very excited to talk to you. We're talking about money today, and we're going to dive into that. But first, why don't you introduce yourself? Tell us where in the world you are and what you do.
I am a money coach, Kim, and a lot of people aren't really familiar with that. It used to be that people could work with a planner for investments, financial planner, or a credit counselor for debt. The truth is, a lot of people have both, right? We want to build net worth. We don't want to go into credit card debt. And neither of those professions is particularly adept at dealing with the emotional side of money, or actually, many have learned how to handle it because there's a lot of amazing professionals, but it's not part of their training and background.
Hmm.
So, money coaches deal with the practical and the emotional side of money. What's your money
Yeah.
mindset, the psychology of money, some of the stuff that you and I will probably dig into today. But there is this practical side also that says, okay, how do you manage cash flow so that you always feel in control of your money? You always know how much you can afford to spend about, going on vacations and things like that. So it really melds many things.
Yeah, and I'm so glad we're going to talk about the emotional side of it because that's your, like you said, it's not something that you usually get into, especially earlier in life. But as I get older and wiser, I have had to really think about that. So before we jump into that, why don't you share with us a time in your life that you felt the most courageous or showed courage?
Oh, courage. Well, since we're all about midlife, right? I could go back to other times, but
Sure.
what's on my mind right now, Kim, is current courage. I took up dancing after I empty nested basically when my son went to college, right? And so
Sure.
now it's been about 7 years. I'm an Argentine tango dancer, and I just decided to enter the national tango competition with my dance
Wow.
partner, who I married last year, by the way, kind of fun. And I'm scared. I'm nervous. I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm going to
Oh,
be dancing on the national stage, being
wow.
judged. And it's just
Yes.
interesting as an adult in midlife, learning a new skill, feeling awkward. I mean,
Yep.
how many of us, it's like, really, do I have to feel like I'm back in high school gym class? It's like, oh my gosh. But here I am trying my best to learn and master this new skill.
Oh my
So,
gosh.
yeah, I feel it does make me feel courageous that I'm doing it, and we'll see how it goes.
Definitely. I love dancing. My husband does not. So any dancing I have to watch other people do. But is it like the Argentine tango one of the most difficult to learn?
It is.
Because I
You
watched
know,
Dancing with the Stars. I learned that.
yeah, and tango is hard, yeah. And it's so funny. I didn't know that when I started dancing. I fell in love with tango, and
Yeah.
that's its own story, but I didn't quite understand when I started that it was among the harder dances, right? And I kind of laugh now when I look back like, well, I could have picked up country two-step instead, or I mean, there's so many wonderful fun dances,
Yeah.
but I ended up kind of going this route, and I don't have any regret. It's been a super deep dive and something to really learn. And
Sure.
I actually met my husband at, oh my gosh, you're gonna laugh at this, a tango house party.
Oh,
I
interesting.
know, right? Isn't that, it's almost old-fashioned sounding
Yeah.
as opposed to online, right? So yeah, I mean, no regrets, but it definitely takes a lot of courage to get out there. I mean, it's one thing to social dance, as most tango dancers, social dance,
Hmm.
most don't compete. Dance competitions, that's a little more unusual. So it does take a lot
Yeah.
of courage to make myself go out there in front of other people.
Good for you. I think that's amazing. And yes, it is very courageous. So good luck to you. I don't know what you're
Thank
supposed to
you.
say for dancers, but probably not break a leg. But
I think they still say that, which I think is very funny. But yes, hopefully
okay,
the
okay.
legs will stay intact.
Yes. Oh, that's amazing. All right. Well, we better get back to our topic, though.
I know, let's just talk about tango for the whole time. Forget money, but
Yeah.
we'll
Okay.
combine dancing with money.
Sure. We'll dance around the topic. Tell us your story. How did you get into wanting to help other people with their money, with your money coaching and mindset and this whole
Mhm.
important work that you're doing?
Yeah, thank you. That's a great question. So the short story is my undergrad was in economics, which, I liked, but I know also sounds pretty dry. And after college, I wandered around for many years trying to figure out what I wanted to do with my life, changed directions, and I ended up getting a master's in psychology. Transpersonal psychology, to be exact, and a lot of Jungian psychology. And I love it. And I still was fascinated with money and its impact in our lives and money from a personal growth point of view and, so many different parts of money that people just don't talk about, the emotional psychology side of money. So when I finished my master's, I met a money coach. And to be honest, Kim, I'd never heard of money coaching. I was at a real crossroads. I was debating becoming a psychotherapist or becoming a financial planner. And good grief.
Wow.
I mean, talk about two
Two different things.
totally different fields of like, wow, I'm feeling like complete opposites. But, I met a money coach who was basically working with people on their relationship to money, a lot of the practical and emotional sides of money. And it was like a thunderbolt hit me. I thought, oh my gosh, someone has combined these two areas that I happen to love that had felt so opposite.
Yeah.
And the rest, they say, is history. So, I did a lot of training after grad school in money coaching
Mhm.
and went into private practice, believe it or not, in the late 1990s. And so I have
Wow.
been a money coach. Some people use the term financial coach. It's synonyms, they mean the same thing, for 25 years. Actually, more than 25 years,
Wow.
I've been a financial coach.
That's amazing because to me, I had not heard of any type of coaching in this way for
Right.
wasn't that long ago, like maybe 5, 10 years.
Yeah, well, you're right. In fact, when I started financial coaching back in the late 90s, that wasn't the term we used because it just didn't exist, right?
Hmm.
No, I mean,
Hmm.
there was not a lot of personal coaching in general, let alone money coaching. So the original terms were around financial counseling. I had an original certification as a financial recovery counselor. I mean, what the heck does any of that even mean? And then over time, as coaching as an industry started growing and there became more and more different types of coaches, then the industry was in kind of a way renamed, if you will, into money coaching and financial coaching. But at that point, I'd already been doing it over a decade.
You were ahead of them, ahead of the curve.
Yeah, well, yeah. Yeah, I go to conferences now, and I'm a member of the Financial Therapy Association, which is,
Uh,
a very cool organization, and they call me the OG just because they
oh,
had never
gee.
met anyone who had been doing it longer than the actual certifications existed in the field,
Oh my
which I
gosh.
thought, God, I'm not that old. Yeah.
No, but you're distinguished. You're esteemed. What just changed the
Yes,
old to that?
exactly. Yeah. Yes, I will
Yeah.
try to keep coloring my hair to keep the gray at bay, but yes, we'll say I'm
Yep.
distinguished.
Been there, done that. So
Yep.
why is it so important to understand that emotional part of money?
That's the big question, right? And
Mhm.
if there's so many different answers, but I think a really great beginning answer is if you don't understand why you feel the way that you do around money, your emotions around money, your unconscious motivations around money, then you end up behaving in ways around money that are not necessarily always good for you. And people get really frustrated with themselves. They're like, why do I keep overspending? Right?
Mhm.
Or why do I struggle with savings? Or why, fill in the blank. But a lot of the reasons that people do various kind of, let's just say, unhealthy money behaviors goes back to how they were raised around money. It goes back to the emotions around money. And what's popular to say nowadays is their money mindset. That's
Mhm.
not, again, that's not a term that we used to use, but I think some of your listeners will probably be familiar with it.
Mhm.
And so knowing what your mindset is and your money mindset in particular really helps you go, oh, okay, that's because I'm so motivated by freedom. Not that I think about that consciously, that no wonder I'm driven to spend all my money going to Hawaii and not save. But we don't know a lot of this. We don't really think about it. And so we react, we feel impulsive around money, and then we think, well, good grief, I'm an adult. Why do I keep ending up in the same place, right? Why do I
Right.
keep ending up with credit card debt or I can't build my net worth? But, the truth is, it's in all likelihood coming from your own personal financial psychology, which
Mhm.
probably is coming from dun dun dun, your childhood.
Ah.
Yep,
Yeah.
exactly.
So let's talk about that. What kind of things, what I'm thinking is if you grew up in a home where there wasn't a lot of money, maybe as you grow up, you either save a lot of it or you just get used to not having it. What does that mean? I mean, what kinds of examples can you give us?
Yeah, there's some truth in that. A lot, if people are not conscious of their money story, if they haven't given a lot of thought to what they saw and how they were raised around money, then we tend to go one of two ways. We either reenact how we were raised. So if we weren't raised with a lot of money, we tend to grow up and replicate this. We under earn, undersell ourselves, keep our needs really small, right? So we
Hmm.
reenact, or we rebel. And again, neither of these are particularly conscious paths, but we go, oh my gosh, at some level, we say, I'm never going to feel like I can't do what I want to do. And I'm never going to go into a used clothing store. And I'm never going to feel like I don't have what I need and what I want, right? But it's reactive.
Hmm.
So, part of the goal is looking at, well, how were you raised and what are the messages that would have imparted? And I know you're aware, I wrote a book that came out last year called Rise Above the Money Fog. And one of the things that I explore is money fog, which is, basically it's the stress and anxiety caused by financial vagueness.
Hmm.
It's many, many, many people have and are in a money fog, but it's more about how money was not talked about when you were growing up. You might have grown up in a family with a lot of money or very little money, but it's more connected to how your family did or didn't openly talk about money.
Hi, everyone. Kim here. I just wanted to remind you that I have a brand new product on my online shop at midlifewithcourage.com. They are beautiful affirmation cards just for you. These are a product that I created. I'm very proud of them. They're called your Daily Dose of Courage. Each day you take a card and you can go in order. They are numbered 1 through 31 for each day of the month, or you can just take them out at random. Use them just to give yourself a little positive message. Maybe you want to use them as a journaling prompt. You can even use them in the evenings before you go to bed as a way of just having a little positive, courageous message to read before you go to sleep at night. So go to midlifewithcourage.com and go on the online shop. The link is right there on the first page and grab your copy of your Daily Dose of Courage affirmation cards. Hmm. And that's kind of what I was alluding to when we started. Like, we don't talk about it. You don't ask
Right.
people what they make and that kind of thing, too. So, you probably don't have the answer to this, but why don't people talk about money? Why is it a topic that we don't want to bring out into the open? Or
Yeah,
do you?
I mean, I'll give you a couple of ideas. I mean, it is a great question. Part of it, if we go back to childhood for a second, there's a big gender piece to this in that we know, like I'm in my 50s, and so we know that for, people in my age group, let's just say 40 to 60, or we can widen it even more. Going back, our parents talked to our brothers about money more than they talk to us. And so there is, we don't want to ignore the gender piece. I know that can get controversial quickly, but the research and the studies are unequivocal that for our generation, money was not taught or talked about as much with daughters
Mhm.
as it was with sons. And so that's one place to start and go, well, why is that? And part of it is generationally, we are still coming out of generations where it wasn't assumed that women would grow up and need to make enough money to support an entire family, right?
Right.
We're not the breadwinner mentality, we're not the provider modeling, and if, it's changing. But we forget how much has changed so quickly within just a couple of generations, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So, and the big question you're asking is, okay, but still, why? Why was it considered impolite to talk
Yeah.
about money? And you know, part of it is our parents weren't comfortable
Yeah.
talking about money. They didn't receive any training. And almost everyone I talk to has a story where at some point they ask something to their mom and dad, like, "Hey, how much money does dad make?" Or
Mm-hmm.
I mean, kids are curious, right? We don't
Right.
know that this is a charged taboo topic until we ask. And generally, the response ranges from we're in outright trouble for asking the question to that is not a question that one asks, right? I mean, different
Yes.
families will say it in different ways, but the
Yes.
answer is do not ask questions like that. That's not polite,
Right.
right?
Right.
And so that's training from such a young age. And if you are raised in a family where unfortunately you heard your parents fight about money, which is not uncommon because if there's not enough money, that causes different dynamics in families, then usually your modeling at an unconscious level is, oh, money's bad. Money makes mom cry. Money is somehow connected to conflict, right? And so
Mm-hmm.
you grow up with this very strong connection that you do not talk about money because bad things happen if you do.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah. I hadn't thought of it that way before just now. Yeah, that makes sense. I think another thing too, and maybe this is jumping too far ahead, but as myself, I was a nurse for 27 years and I'm a business owner, business person, and going from that profession where I was serving others to now I want to make money doing what I do. There's conflict there. And you
Mhm.
talk about under earning and not charging, I think what we should be. Can you talk about that a little bit?
That's a big, juicy topic, isn't it? Yeah. So,
Yeah.
I mean, we've got a lot of relationships to money. One of our relationships to money is our relationship to spending. And people think, yeah, okay, we all know, and assume, they probably assume we're going to talk about that. But you're bringing up our relationship to earning money.
Hmm.
And that's just as important. And they're connected. We've got to earn to spend. What under earning is, the definition of under earning is the pattern of earning below your potential. And if you unpack that definition, Kim, the pattern of earning below your potential, there's two big pieces of that. Number one, you know, potential. We all have different potential. And so really thinking about what is my potential. But the bigger part of the definition is actually the word pattern, because we all occasionally undersell ourselves. Things happen. We get stuck with a bad boss or the economy or a pandemic, right? But under earning is when we consistently undersell ourselves throughout our career. And so we are the common denominator, which tells us there's something psychological going on. It's not just outside forces when you see a pattern.
Hmm. Yeah. I get that because it seems like anything I've learned as I'm getting wiser is we have to keep asking questions and going back and back and back and back and deeper. Maybe not
Mhm.
back, maybe deeper. And this is just another, this is another area where we still need to do that and kind of deep dive into those things. And so that's what you are helping other people do. And you work with women mostly, but I think you also work with men as well?
I do. Yeah. My specialty is working with women in midlife, but I have had some wonderful male clients over the years as well. You know, and,
Mhm.
and, and part of it is in midlife, there's just a lot of transitions that people
Mhm.
go through, and money seems to come up a lot for people
Yeah.
when they go through a transition. You know, it's
Mhm.
divorce or empty nesting or retirement, you know, and suddenly we're not sure what we can afford or how much is enough or what would be
Right.
possible? A lot of these key questions that I walk people through, but the answers to a lot of those questions change when you go through a transition.
Hmm. Yeah, for sure. We're going through the retirement transition with my husband the last couple of years, and he retired early, so before 59 and a half. So we're at this point where we're kind of watching everything very closely, and that's a hard thing to do sometimes when you're
Well,
used to
it's
having
it's
this income.
exciting, but yeah, exactly. It's exciting, it's stressful. When people go from and this is going to sound very kind of financial speak, but when we go from the accumulation phase in life to the deaccumulation,
Hmm.
meaning we've saved and saved to retire, but now we're like spending our money in retirement, it's very nerve-wracking for people to make that transition and feel like, oh my gosh, will the money last? I mean, I have a lot of clients that come in at that transition going, okay, I think I know how much I can spend in retirement, but I can't mess it up because you're no longer wanting to just go out and get another job if suddenly there's not enough money.
Right, right. So what's your process like when you're working with someone? It sounds like you have two different areas, the financial and the emotional psychotherapy part. Is it kind of a good mix of both, like half and half, or is everybody different, or how does that all work?
I mean, everyone is different to a degree, but money coaching does always combine both.
Hmm.
So I start often on the practical side because we've got to have some type of foundation to look at. And also, the number one thing I hear when people call me is I'm tired of not feeling in control of my money. And so, getting some systems in place and looking at where the money's going and knowing how much you can spend is life changing and wonderful, right? And from
Hmm.
there, then we go into people's money story, for example. But if you start there, if you start with, well, let's look at your money personality, one of my other favorite topics. The problem is you'll get a lot of insight like, oh, that's why I do what I do, but nothing's really changed. I'm still not
Ah,
certain if I can afford to go to Hawaii and all those different things, right? And
sure.
so people then sometimes feel worse because they feel like, well, wait a
Oh,
minute, I now know myself and I know my money type and I know my unconscious beliefs around money. So why do I still not feel in control and I don't have a lot of clarity on what is a lifestyle that is sustainable, right? So we need
hmm,
both.
sure.
But in my not so humble opinion, it's better to start on the practical side first and then weave in the emotional and the psychological.
Yeah, that makes total sense to me too. So let's talk about your book. Tell us about that. How do you help women with this book?
Let me just say again the definition of the money fog.
Yes,
So,
please.
money fog is defined as stress and anxiety that comes from financial vagueness. And what's interesting about that definition is, and I'll give your listeners a couple questions to kind of quiz themselves here in just a second to help them figure out, well, are they in a money fog? But what I want to highlight is that it's the feelings that we feel as a result of being financially vague. So it's not financial vagueness, it's how we feel as a result of being financially vague. So when I
Gotcha.
wrote the book, Rise Above the Money Fog, 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 stands for when you are in fear around money, overwhelm around money, or you feel guilt around money. That's what the F, O, and G stands for: fear, overwhelm, guilt. And I use those as signposts because if you're feeling overwhelmed around money, it's often an indicator that it's because you're in a money fog. If you feel fearful or overwhelmed, or I feel really guilt ridden when I think about what I just spent on the new couch, that is likely because if you're having a guilt reaction, right? It's likely
Sure.
because you're in a money fog. So here's like, can I give your listeners three or four questions to
Definitely.
help them?
Yes, please.
So if you don't know how much you're actually spending, meaning do you know where all your money goes? That's the kind of an obvious question around. That's a sign you might be in a money fog. If you don't know how much money you need to earn to cover your basic needs, if you don't know how much money you need to earn to live a life that you love, that's a sign of being in a money fog. And if you don't have a great system for knowing where your money is going and coming from, that's a sign of a money fog. I would also add if money doesn't feel like a sacred tool to help you live your best life, then that's probably a sign of being in a money fog. So, there's many ways to think about it, but you can gauge if you're in a money fog by going, well, do I know how much I spend? Do I know what I earn? Do I know what I need?
Mhm.
That's a really interesting question. People often
Yeah.
will know what their salary is,
Mhm.
but do you know how much money you need to earn to live the life you really want? So all of these are signposts of being in a money fog. And part of the frustration with being in a money fog, you don't usually know you're in a fog until you're out of it and looking back. So you generally feel the impact of being in a fog, right? Like I
Mhm.
opened the book with a story of hiking in a really deep fog that was actually a form of smog. And when I got to the top of a hill, and came up out of this fog smog and looked back down, I was like, oh my gosh, no wonder I wasn't feeling good. No
Sure.
wonder things were so vague and grime in my collar of my clothes and things like that. I hadn't realized that I had been walking around in such deep smog until I had hiked up out of it.
Yeah. That's such a great description of it. I love that. So,
Mhm.
Mikelann, I have heard a lot about you mentioned earlier the money mindset, and I've heard people say, well, just you attract your money and just have this mindset. It's more than just changing your mindset, isn't
That
it?
would be like, oh, please tell me, what are the magic words?
Yes, I'm
Yes.
just going to do something and it's just going to come to me.
Yes, repeat this affirmation 20 times and
Yeah,
poof, you will have more money. Yeah.
right.
I mean, words and language are definitely powerful. I mean, you know
Mhm.
that, better than most people for sure, but we need a combination of financial clarity and looking at, well, what is our mindset? Because, sometimes our mindset is, just as an example, I don't deserve, right? Or our mindset is, I have to be perfect before people will pay me what I'm worth. I
Mhm.
mean, if we look at kind of some of the earning mindsets that people fall into, but most people are not aware of what their mindset is. And so they will layer on abundance affirmations on top of unconscious negative beliefs. And then they don't go anywhere. And they're like, well, why am I not going anywhere? Because, if you walk around saying, oh, I do deserve abundance, or, I mean, you and I are being a little dramatic, but, you get
Yeah,
what I'm saying.
I know
If
what
you,
you're saying.
if
Yep.
you say whatever the beautiful phrase is that you've heard, but
Mhm.
you layer it on top of unconscious messaging that honestly says the opposite. The truth is, I unconsciously don't believe I deserve to make good money. Okay.
Mhm.
So when you have a conscious belief layered on top of an unconscious belief wins.
Oh, interesting. Very interesting.
Hmm.
Hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. And I kind of wish that wasn't true, right? Because then
Yeah,
we wouldn't
right?
have to do all this work of like going through our childhoods and all of this stuff.
Yeah.
We could just, read a book about let's just pick a mantra and say it.
Yeah. Wouldn't that be nice? Mostly
Yeah.
everything in life requires some work on our part. Life lesson number 822.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Truth.
Oh my goodness. I would imagine too, and I know you sometimes will work with couples, and that's probably a challenge sometimes. I'm thinking with two different people.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. Partly just because people have different mindsets, kind of what
Yeah.
we were just talking about, different beliefs, different family backgrounds
Yeah.
around money. So, and they get married and then hilarity ensues, but, generally before people are partnered up and living together, they're not talking or thinking as much about money. They're, opposites attract, and there's lots of wonderful stuff in that. But it's when couples learn how to talk about money and have money dates that it's so transformative.
Money dates. I love that.
Money dates, yep. Money
Yeah.
dates. Get a glass of wine and look at what you guys are planning on doing this month with money. I mean, in some ways, it really does come down to something that's that.
Wow.
straightforward, but getting used to talking as a couple about what you want to do with your money this month really is transformative.
That's such a good idea. My husband worked 40 hours a week and I worked not quite that much, but kind of switching around who was in charge of the money. And I took a lot of it on. And now that he's not working, I'm kind of like, okay, you need to know about what's going on here. And yeah, so that's been a transition and definitely probably could have used a financial coach there for a while before we kind of figured everything out.
Oh gosh. Well,
But
it's fun. It's funny for us because I remarried about a year ago, and I could write
oh,
a whole book. In fact, I'm debating my next book. But for my now new husband, it was interesting for him marrying a money coach, right? It's
oh,
like,
sure.
oh, yay, we get to talk about money all the time. Yippee.
Well, that's good. That's
He
a good
loves
thing.
it. Yeah, he's relieved because the alternative is far more stressful for him.
Yeah.
But it is sometimes we do have to kind of laugh. So.
Yeah, of course, of course. Well, if people are interested in working with you and wanting to get your book, where would they find you?
So the book is called Rise Above the Money Fog, and they can buy it on Amazon, where apparently all good things come from. But if they want to talk with me directly, then I would go to Seattle Money Coach, seattlemoneycoach.com. I've got clients all over the world, really, but mainly all over the United States. And that is where you can get a free ebook on, it's a great quiz on are you in a money fog? I put together this like wonderful, so many wonderful free things. And we're about to put up a new ebook on understanding your money personality. And that is a very juicy free ebook that I think people will really, really like. But of course, you can also book a discovery call with me too if you want to chat.
Sure. Yeah, wonderful. Yeah, definitely do that. I will put the link to your website on our in the show notes. And I
Mhm.
was in there today looking through and there you do have a lot of free stuff for people.
I do.
That's amazing.
I do. Like, come have some free stuff. Yeah,
That's great. That's
absolutely.
wonderful.
But
Yeah.
the advantage or disadvantage of being in business 25 years, it's like I'm in the middle of a website rebrand reorganization, and oh my goodness, it's a little overwhelming because there's
Oh
so
gosh.
much.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
a lot. That's one thing I kind of hire out as much as I can because I don't want to
Oh,
deal
no,
with
me
it.
too,
But
for sure. But
yeah, yeah.
someone's got to decide what stays and goes. So, yeah.
Exactly, exactly. Oh, wonderful. Well, Mikelann, before we say goodbye, is there anything that maybe we didn't cover or any one little piece of advice you want to share with our listeners?
I think we had a lot of really great stuff today. I just would add that I want everyone to think about the fact that they're on a journey around money and just to give themselves a lot of grace for where they are on the journey. There's a lot in behind us, there's a lot in front of us, and everyone has to believe that they're at the right place in their journey, and you're simply starting to look at what's part of your new money chapter, what's coming up.
Yeah, wonderful, wonderful advice, and so much more that we probably didn't have time to get into. So, listeners, go to her website, seattlemoneycoach.com, and schedule a discovery call, get her book, get her all her free ebooks, and hopefully someday we can have you back and we can talk more about this important topic.
Many, many possible subjects. Thank you for
Yeah.
having me.
Thank you, Michael, and we will talk to you soon. You've been listening to the Midlife with Courage podcast. If you liked what you heard, I would love it if you would leave me a review. It really does make a difference. Or even better, send a link of this episode to a friend. Until next time, take care of your beautiful self.